We've been going through this summer, we're almost at the end of it, both summer and the series, looking at this book of Exodus and the way in which God goes on Exodus with his people, the way in which he takes a journey with them, and in our lives, our spiritual journey, how God is going to work with us, how he's going to liberate us, free us from the things that we need, or things that enslave us. And what you've seen, hopefully, in every turn is this God who continually gives grace to these folks. He's continually giving them mercy, and they continually mess up. And if you've noticed, if you've been here during the summertime, hopefully you'll notice, if you were here last week, Dennis took a part of the book of Mark and reflected a little bit on the law and on keeping the law. And if you'll notice what I did conveniently today, I skipped the whole law. So I went from Exodus 19 to now we're at Exodus 31. Isn't that convenient? So you don't get the 10 Commandments. Okay, thou shalt not, thou shalt. Why? Why would I do that? Here's why. It's because Exodus 31 and what we'll see in Luke 6 give a surprising view of what Sabbath rest means. And how important and vital it is. Here's why I did that. I skipped over the 10 Commandments and the other moral law and the tabernacle stuff and all that. You can go back and read it. And it might make you doze off to sleep a little bit. So that's a good reason why I skipped over it as well. But here's the most important reason why I did that. Because in Exodus 31, it says that these are the last words that God gives to Moses. Moses, he says, go down the mountain and tell them this. And he says, wait, before you go, I got something really important. It's like, I don't know if you've had this, if you've had a roommate or a spouse and you're about to leave the house, you get dressed up and you feel good, you feel like you got your outfit on, you're good, and you're about to walk out the door and they say, wait, you're going to wear that? That? Really? I don't have that happen, as you can tell. I'm well put together, right? But you know that wait, I got one more thing. That? This is what God is saying. Do you see? This is the context. God is looking at his people and going, whoa, you're going to wear that? Let me tell you something about Sabbath. Let me tell you something how important it is. And he says, it's so important that if you don't understand it, you will die. You will wither. You will be cut off. And you come to this point where Jesus, that's why I read Luke chapter 6, and if you're astute enough, or if you were paying attention, you probably should say something like this. Pastor, those two stories conflict and they contradict themselves. On the one hand, God is saying, the Sabbath is the most important thing. Do it because I've done it, God says. We'll get to that in a little bit. But then on the other hand, Jesus is seemingly contradicting him. And if you look at it, it's actually not a contradiction, because look what Jesus says. He doesn't say, I'm here, now the Sabbath's not important anymore. He actually stands and says, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. I am the Lord of the Sabbath. You know how bold of a claim that is? What Jesus is saying is, you will know no rest until you know me. Until you know what I bring to the Sabbath, he says. You will know no rest. Now listen, isn't it... Go back to Exodus 31. This is what God says. He says, these are my final words. I'm writing them with my finger. This is the important thing. If you're not going to remember anything, remember the Sabbath. You need it. You'll die without it. You need deep soul rest. You need a rhythm of rest. And I think God does this at the very end, after the 10 Commandments and after the moral codes and the tabernacle laws and all that good stuff. I think he does it because he knows that this is the main thing we need to hear. Our souls are in an ever constant motion. We're fatigued. We're overworked. We hoard. We work too hard. And in the city of Seoul, that's to be expected. It's a major city. That's the way we're wired. That's why I believe God at Exodus 31 says, if you want to know something about how to live your life, you have to learn how to rest. You have to learn rest. And look back at Exodus 31. God says, do it because I did it. If I can rest, you can rest. Now think about this logically. Lord of the universe, was he tired on the seventh day? No. He wasn't sleepy, but he took rest. And he says, I was refreshed. Brothers and sisters, today we're going to look at this topic of Sabbath. And I don't have 3 points for you. I know, Dennis, I'm letting you down. I don't have my 3 points. And I don't even have an outline for you because all I want you to hear is rest. Why? Because it runs counter to everything in our lives. We are constantly told, do more, earn more, achieve, progress, go forward, or you're going backwards. There's a great article, Judith Shulevitz, and I put this quote inside your bulletin. She wrote a wonderful article for the New York Times. Man, I'm dating myself, but it's a long time ago now, maybe 2003-ish. And it's called Bring Back the Sabbath, and she's talking about it from a Jewish perspective. But she's got this great line in there about what the Sabbath does and what's going on in our own hearts. She says this, on that weekly holiday, observed by, as she called, all present-day civilized humanity, not only did drudgery give way to festivity, family gatherings, and occasionally worship, and here's the key part, but the machinery of self-censorship shut down too, stilling the eternal inner murmur of self-reproach. She says, look, in all of us, there's an eternal inner murmur. There's a little voice that says if you rest, something's wrong with you. Earn more, achieve more, do more, get the promotion, go forward. And the Sabbath, the concept of Sabbath, the concept of being able to pause and find deep soul rest runs counter to everything that's in our nature. Here, and I'll prove it to you. Can we do this, a little social experiment today? And this is going to freak some of you out, I know. Some of you are like too cool for school, so you don't want to do activities at church. Some of you can help me out. Can you do something with me here? Let's go. I want you, everybody, you can, and we're spread out. You got a lot of room. There's no reason why you can't do this. Lay down on the chairs. Lay down. Come on, you can do it. I'll do it with you. Come on, let's do it. Why not, guys? Come on, lay down. Okay, no, you guys, some of you are doing it? Okay, I can't see. Wow, okay. Now listen, what you're thinking is, what is this guy doing right now? I'm trying to show you how silly Sabbath is. Because right now, you're not making any progress in life. Right now, I'm not even making any progress with the sermon, am I? I'm not moving forward. And you're saying, hurry it up. I got to go to lunch. What do I got to do? I got to get things done today. I got errands to do. What is this guy doing, making me lie down? And it feels really, really silly, does it not? Sabbath fights against the eternal inner murmur. The eternal inner murmur. Okay, now you can get up. Okay, enough of being unproductive. I know that freaked some of you guys out. Thanks for playing along. Some of you really laid down. Wow, okay. Wake up. Who fell asleep? Why did I do that? Because God says that's what you must do every seventh day. See now, look, the Sabbath, what he's saying is, when he builds this into the community, when Jesus says, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath, in me you find the rest that you've always wanted. You silence the eternal inner murmur, he says, when you accept me, Jesus says. And it'll feel like you're not making any progress, but you'll be refreshed. You need it. You need it as a rhythm in your life. See, here, Sabbath is much more than just coming to church. Do you see now? Come to church. I want you to come to church. Don't get me wrong. But it's way more than that, is it not? It's building into the rhythm of your life this sense that I can rest. I can silence the eternal inner murmur that says, you're not good enough. Work harder. Send that email. Answer that phone. Go into the office. Do more. And God says, my Sabbath rest will silence that murmur if you know Jesus as the Lord of the Sabbath. Now, what do I mean by that? Look at what he does. In Luke 6, what Jesus does is he references the story in 1 Samuel about David going into the temple and taking bread. It's a way of Jesus saying, listen, the Sabbath is me. I'm not breaking the law, he says. I'm giving you a new interpretation of it. I'm telling you, he says, you'll never know Sabbath. You'll be just following the rules. See, the Pharisees say, wait, you're breaking the rules. And Jesus says, it's not about the rules. That's not going to give you rest. I will, he says, because I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. Now, how do you get that rest? Well, in Hebrews 4, chapter 4, they talk about it. They say that the people will come into rest as God has rested. And God, when he's giving this command in Exodus 31, he references Genesis 1. He says, I rested. Go back to Genesis 1. God does a work, and what does he say every time? It's good. I can rest. He says it's finished. Let me ask you something. Can you look at your jobs that way? Can you finally look at your job and say, it's good. I'm done. Now I rest. God, throughout the rhythm of his creation, throughout the rhythm of his job, his work, he's building, he's making, he's creating. And every time he looks at it and he says, it's good. It's good. It's good. And therefore I can rest. See, you and I will never, ever be able to find Sabbath rest unless we can look at our jobs and our lives and our relationships and say, it's good. Why, how can we say that? How do you know? How do you know it's good? It's because Jesus Christ looks down on the cross at you and me and he says, it's good. It's finished. You need not do anything else. I save you, Jesus says, because I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. You'll never have rest until you know that he looks at you and he says, you're good. Why? Why continue to run the race and wear yourself out? Jesus, the Lord of the universe, looks down at you and me and he says, you're good. And to prove it, I'll die on a cross to say that it's finished. You don't need to achieve more. You can look at your job and say, it is good. And slowly, the eternal inner murmur of self-reproach begins to be silenced. You don't need that promotion. You don't need that affirmation. You don't need to do one more thing. You can find rest and say, it's good. I'm done. There's a great line in Chariots of Fire. Harold Abrams, you remember they're the runners, they're the sprinters. And of course, they contrast the two runners, Harold Abrams and Aric Liddell, and one's a Christian, one's a Jewish person. And there's an interesting line that Harold Abrams has where he looks at somebody and he says this. He says, I'm forever in pursuit, and I don't even know what I'm chasing. And there's a pause, and he says this. He says, I will raise my eyes and look down that corridor, meaning the racetrack, 4 feet wide with 10 lonely seconds to justify my whole existence. He says, I look down that corridor. I look down that racetrack and I see 10 lonely seconds to justify my existence. See, if you don't know that Jesus loves you, or maybe you said, yeah, I am a Christian and I know Jesus loves me, but I'm still wearing myself thin at work. I still can't find rest. It's because you're not resting in him. He says, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. I've done it all. I looked at you and said, it's good. You need not fret with 10 lonely seconds to justify your existence anymore. It's done. It's finished on the cross. Now rest. Can you do that? As silly as it was for you to lay down, and as unproductive as that was, can you do that now in your life? You can. If you look at him as the Lord of the Sabbath. He's done everything for you. You don't have to have 10 lonely seconds to justify your existence. You're already justified. You're already loved. He's the only one who looks at you and he looks at me and he knows what's inside. And he knows how broken we are. He knows how tired we are. He knows how we always try to justify our existence. And he's the only one who looks at you and he looks at me and he says, you're good. Because of Jesus. Does that silence the eternal inner murmur? The gospel is the only thing that's going to. Let me conclude by saying this. And it's easy for a pastor to get up here and talk And you're like, well, yeah, okay, Pastor, you think you got it all figured out. I don't. And the Sabbath thing came back to bite me recently, which is why I wasn't here last week. Thankfully, Dennis took over. I didn't learn to rest properly. Because while Harold Abrahams had 10 seconds, lonely seconds, to justify existence, I have about 28 minutes every morning, because that's about the average of my sermon time. I get 28 lonely minutes to justify my existence. And I didn't rest properly. And so last week, of course, I took off, and I missed a lot of you guys. And it was the first Sunday in over 3.5 years that I didn't do anything for church. So no vacation, a little vacation like 1 week here or there, but not really. And so this was the first Sunday my wife and I talked it over. We said, we're just going to stay home. And everybody stepped up, and you guys ran the show, and it was a good job doing it. But let me tell you what my Sabbath rest experience taught me. It was really weird to wake up and to not do church, because that's my job. I felt somehow as if I wasn't achieving something. I wasn't doing something right. And I woke up, and can I tell you what I did that morning? Are you curious at all? Nobody? I watched a little football game. I'm going to be honest. I did. Okay. I watched a football game, my guilty indulgence. And while you guys were here singing songs and worshiping, had my feet up in my living room, my TV computer room watching a game. But here's what we did. We took our kids to a kids cafe, a local kids cafe near our home. And there's, toys and everything for the kids to play. And my 4.5-year-old daughter was playing. And my 2.5-year-old son sauntered into the TV room where they were watching a movie, Portoro and then Tangled, the Rapunzel movie. I won't bore you with all the details, but if you have kids, you know those movies quite well. Well, you can't leave your kid in there alone, so I had to go in there. And I've seen that movie like 50,000 times. So the last thing I wanted to do was watch that movie. But I sat there, not doing anything, not doing my job, quote unquote, but taking rest. And I sat there, and I almost felt weird. I felt that what's going on? Eternal inner murmur. Until my son, little 2.5-year-old chubby guy, squeaks back into me and sits down. And if you ever had a little boy sit on your lap, it's one of the most cutest, endearing things in the world. And I started to lose it. I started to cry. And I kissed him on top of his head, and I said, "It's good. It's good." At that moment, I didn't need 10 lonely seconds to justify my existence. I didn't need 28 minutes of lonely minutes to justify my existence. Why? Because it's one of the first times I thought about, this is what God does to me. He kisses me on top of the head, and he says, "It's good. Rest in that." Jesus dying for you, Jesus rising for you, giving his life up for you is the way to say that God looks at you and kisses the top of your head, and he says, "It's good." Find peace in that. Find rest in that. Silence the eternal inner murmur. Let the gospel do that. Go in prayer now, in silence, asking God, what does this mean? Remind me how you kiss me on my head and say, I am good because of Jesus.